As soon as I heard the announcement of a new season of Telltale's The Walking Dead, I thought it was a bit strange it was subtitled A New Frontier instead of simply Season 3. To some, a developer dropping the season number from the title of their product might not seem like an issue worth talking about. However, when you take a bit of time to look into the reasons behind the decision, it can actually tell you an awful lot about the thought processes behind their creative choices. I'm going to briefly use the example of Star Wars The Force Awakens to help illustrate my point. Now, even though The Force Awakens is the 7th installment in the Star Wars main saga, you'll notice it was almost never referred to as Episode 7 during the movie's marketing. The reason being is that those who never watched Star Wars before aren't very likely to jump into the franchise at the 7th film because they feel like they won't know what the hell is going on. Therefore, dropping the number from the title encourages those who have never seen a film before to give it a go, because it seems like they won't need that much prior knowledge of the franchise. In addition, The Force Awakens has been described as by many as a soft reboot, meaning that although it follows on from the previous entries, it can also serve as a good starting point for those who haven't experienced Star Wars before. I mean, that's all well and good, but what the hell does this have to do with The Walking Dead, you ask? Well, simply put, although A New Frontier follows on from the previous 2 seasons, it's obviously been designed with the intention of attracting newcomers to the series, rather than appeasing those who've played through the first 2 installments. And whilst this can result in a pretty decent experience for those who haven't played through Telltale's 2 previous efforts, those who have will be overcome by a huge sense of deja vu, as many of the set pieces and characters present mirror those found in the past. Those looking forward to continuing their journey as Clementine will be bitterly disappointed, as this time around she is pushed to the sidelines and reduced to a secondary character, with the player only being able to control her in brief flashback sequences. Instead, players take control of a new character named Javi, whose path eventually crosses with the young zombie slayer. There's nothing really wrong with Javi, he's a decent enough guy, but he just isn't that interesting when compared with previous protagonist Clem and Lee. In addition, the family that he's tasked with protecting aren't a lot more compelling either. Javi is joined on his journey by his brother's wife Kate, and their 2 children Mariana and Gabe. Despite how hard the writers may have tried, I never found any of these 3 to be particularly likeable. In fact, when things came down to it, I always chose every dialogue choice that I could, which ended up with one of them pissing off to somewhere else. Hell, when push came to shove, I even chose to break Kate's heart and tell her that I didn't have feelings for her, simply because she annoyed me so much. Thankfully, not all of the characters are as bland as Javi's family. The 4 members of the council that rule the group named the New Frontier are all complex individuals who double cross one another to get what they want, and the interactions between them and the player are some of the best moments in the series. In addition, it's kind of hard not to love Javi's crewmate Trip, especially when he's coming out with Abraham-like turns of phrase.
Shit my nuts! Ah, fuck you, fuckstick!
Similar to when players first met Glenn and Herschel in Season 1, A New Frontier also attempts to bridge the gap between comic and game by introducing Paul Jesus Monroe to Telltale's universe. Although I'll admit it is cool seeing Jesus doing his thing, wall-kicking walkers and charging into battle with his awesome looking Kingdom armour on, anyone with any prior knowledge of the franchise will find its initial introduction to be a bit of a dumb sequence. The reason being is that when the player first encounters Jesus, they have the options of either deciding to trust him, or to be wary of him and tie him up. The majority of Walking Dead fans all know who Jesus is, so they won't tie him up, which makes this choice kind of pointless. In fact, because I know Jesus is a good guy due to reading the comics and watching the TV show, I always picked the good dialogue choices when I spoke to him, which caused his appearance during this season to be less mysterious and intriguing than it would have been if I didn't have any prior knowledge of who he was. The same principle also applies to Clementine, and what I mean by that is that the majority of the time Javi converses with her, the player is given the opportunity to say something harsh or negative. The problem is that I've already played through 2 previous seasons with Clem, the first in which I played as Lee and protected her with my life, and the second in which she was the protagonist, so why on earth would I choose to be horrible to her now? Again, her inclusion is done in such a way that actually interacting with her may be more engaging for those who haven't played previous seasons rather than those who have. In terms of the narrative, the group who go by the name of the New Frontier play a vital role. Basically, they're a community of sorts similar to the likes of Kingdom and Alexandria, except, well, they're the bad guys in this story. In typical Walking Dead fashion, a misunderstanding is ultimately the cause of the coming together between the New Frontier and Javi's group, and it's up to Javi to protect his loved ones from their brutality. Truth be told, the story isn't going to win any points for its originality. Similar themes have already been covered by the TV show, comic, and even previous seasons of the game. However, the narrative does do a good job of presenting its ideas, and there are some interesting twists to the classic Telltale formula thrown in for good measure, which I won't spoil for those who haven't played through it. Despite the majority of the story generally being okay, the ending somewhat leaves a sour taste in my mouth. As previously mentioned, Clementine is briefly playable during flashback sequences, and during these moments Clem is focused on finding AJ, who has unfortunately been taken away from her. For those who don't know, AJ is a baby who Clementine ends up caring for during the end of Season 2. As the credits roll on A New Frontier, Clementine is still on the road trying to find him, and she walks off into the distance. A message appears on the screen informing the player that Clementine's story isn't over, which to my mind means clearly that Clem will be the main playable character next season. Now perhaps I'm jumping to conclusions, but to me if we are to play as Clem next time around, it makes this season just seem, well, kind of pointless. By focusing on characters who aren't going to be centre stage in the next instalment, it makes Javi's story just seem like filler, with the only purpose of this season being the fact that players end up with a unique Clementine that they can import over to next season. Of course I could be completely wrong, but I've just got a gut feeling that this is going to happen. Overall, the 5 episodes that make up A New Frontier aren't terrible, but they definitely aren't amazing either, and certainly when compared to the 2 previous seasons they pale in comparison. Repeated scenarios and situations, as well as the bizarre decision to make Clementine a side character, aren't really going to appeal to long-time fans. On the other hand, I feel that even newcomers to the series may struggle to really resonate with Javi in a similar way to which I did with Lee all the way back in Season 1. Due to the introduction of a new protagonist, combined with the ever-presence of Clementine, A New Frontier exists in this really awkward position, in which it seems that the developers are too scared to fully move forward and leave the past behind, but are also too worried about solely relying on players who have played the previous entries. Despite having some decent moments here and there, ultimately A New Frontier ends up being extremely disappointing.